In this video, we want to explicitly discuss the impact of a change in supply or a change in demand on the market equilibrium. And so if we want to start here with a picture of a demand curve, we could look at what would happen when the supply curve changes. So let's try putting a supply curve in. There we go. We got our nice upward sloping supply curve, and we have a market equilibrium here, a price of $5, market equilibrium quantity of 4. So you can think about the factors that shift supply. Maybe an alternative product that this company produces has a price change, so that they might shift the supply of this product. The input prices can change. Their expectation of what this product will sell for in the future can change. The number of firms in the industry can change, and the overall technology. Those are the 5 factors we learned that can shift supply. So let's go ahead and assume that there's an expectation that the future price is going to go down. So expected future price by the suppliers is going to be less. So if that expectation exists for our sellers, that tells them that if I sell my stuff later, I'm going to get less. And therefore, I'd really prefer to sell it now. And so you're going to see a general increase in supply because of that. So you can end up with a picture that looks like this. And we've done this before, but what we want to focus on right now is what is the impact on the market equilibrium. So when you have a supply increase, we see we get a new market equilibrium price of about $3.50. So the price goes down, market equilibrium price has gone down, and market equilibrium quantity has gone up. This can make some intuitive sense in that as the supply grows, as the quantity being made available to the market is growing, the only way to get the consumers to absorb this excess capacity is to lower the price. If you tried to keep the price the same on the new supply curve way out here, we can see that while the suppliers would be happy with that, at that old price, the quantity demanded, of course, is back at 4. So the only way to get the additional supply being made available is to have this movement along the demand curve and this movement down to this lower price. So if an increase in supply causes price to go down and quantity to go up for the market equilibrium, then you can work out that when supply decreases, when you have a shrinking of supply for some reason, one of the factors changes and causes a leftward shift of the supply curve, you're going to see a higher price and a lower quantity. So one of the things then we see here with a shift in supply curve is it has an opposite impact on price and quantity. One goes up and one goes down. All right, we did a change in supply, so let's go ahead and do a change in demand. This can be our original demand curve, our original market equilibrium at 5 units at $5. And then one of our factors we learned about for the demand curve will change. Maybe the price of a complement has increased. Okay, a complement was something that you would consume with this product, and now it's more expensive, and that's going to overall lower my demand for this product because the thing I would like to consume with it is now more expensive. And so at every price, you're going to have a lower quantity demanded associated. So you get a decrease in demand. And so we see our new equilibrium is now $4 and 4 units. So when the demand decreases, we have a drop in price and we have a drop in quantity. These two are moving together. So when we see the equilibrium price and quantity moving in the same direction, both down or both up, it's likely we're observing some sort of change in demand. So again, when we have a curve shift, this time with the demand being the curve shifting, we see that that means for the other curve, there's this movement along the supply curve. In this case, movement down along the supply curve. As the price falls, the quantity the suppliers are willing to supply will fall as well. So again, you can work out for yourself, you can draw a little sketch of what would happen when the demand increases. We're going to see in that case, price and quantity would both increase as well. Now we want to take a look at a possibility of both curves shifting. Now realize that it's not one factor changing that could cause both to shift. When only one factor changes, that affects only one curve and you have movement along the other curve. Those are the examples we just looked at. But it is possible in our dynamic economy that you would have something happening on the demand side, maybe a price change in a complement like we did, and then also something could be happening on the supply side. Maybe they're improving their technology, maybe there's more firms coming into the market. And so if each curve is experiencing a change, what does that mean for the market equilibrium? That's what we want to look at next. So I want to point out that we actually cannot be sure what's going to happen to price and quantity without actually seeing the picture. So let's just see what I'm talking about. Let's have an increase in demand in this picture. That's going to come along with a higher equilibrium price and a higher equilibrium quantity if that was the end of the story. So we're going to have a demand increase. And let's go ahead and do a supply increase as well. So let's do supply increase. It looks like that. Supply increase. Okay. So let's see here. Our original S&D crossed here. So there's our quantity, and that looks like our price. And now that we have to look for where S prime and D prime cross, we're going to have this quantity, come on, and we're going to have this price. All right, so demand increased, supply increased. We ended up with a price increase and a quantity increase. Now that's what we would expect if just the demand changed. When just supply increases, we saw before that you actually end up with a higher quantity but a lower price. So how come this happened? Well, you might wonder why I drew the picture the way I did. There's a relatively large change in demand and a relatively small change in supply. So obviously, if that was reversed, let's look down here, and I'm still going to have demand increase, and I'm still going to have supply increase, but now I'm just going to reverse the size of these increases. And so now what we're going to see in this case is, all right, so this would be, well, now it looks a little confusing, but let's see here. This is D prime and this is D. All right, so our original S and D crossed here. There's your quantity and price. And here's our S prime, D prime. Quantity has increased and price has now decreased. So this is a different result. Equilibrium price, the actual equilibrium price has decreased, whoops, and quantity has increased. All right, so why do we get these different reactions or different results? And it basically has to do with what I was pointing out on the first couple of slides. When demand changes, price and quantity move together in the same direction. When supply changes, they move in opposite directions. And so when you put both curves shifting, you can know what's going to happen with one of the two. You can know what's going to happen to price, you can know what's going to happen to quantity, but you can't know what's going to happen to both. Okay, why do I say that? Let's see here. An increase in demand alone is price increase, quantity increase. An increase in supply alone is a price decrease and a quantity increase. So what we can see then is we have agreement on the quantity. Both factors, both curve shifts are going to result in higher equilibrium quantity, but we have an opposite impact on price. And so if you were told that these two curves increase, what is going to happen to price? Your answer would have to be, I don't know, if you don't draw me the picture. It would depend on which picture we're talking about. This one up here where there's a huge increase of demand, or this one out here where there's a relatively huge increase in supply. So you can only know then, if you're just abstractly told that both curves increase, you can only with surety say, yes, equilibrium quantity is increased, but price, it depends. So when we look at both curves shifting, you just have to be careful probably to draw the picture out and to be sure which one you know for sure is going to increase and which one is not. So you can try this out with both curves decreasing, you can try this out with demand increasing, supply decreasing, and you'll start to see that you can only be sure of one of the two. You can only be sure in our case here that equilibrium quantity will increase and you're not sure about price. And then there can be other cases where you can be sure that price will change a certain way, but quantity is moving in opposite directions. Okay, let me tell you one cautionary tale and maybe make clear why I've made a big emphasis on moving along a demand curve versus changing a curve, shifting an actual curve. And this is where you can get lost in your reasoning if you're not careful. So let's say we start off with this particular market equilibrium and a factor changes that causes our supply curve to increase to here, okay? So maybe technology's improved. And so far you're doing good, right? You had a market equilibrium price and quantity. We now have a new market equilibrium price and quantity. And then you start to get confused. You're thinking, oh no, price has fallen. And I remember the law of supply telling me that when the price falls, the quantity supply falls. I'm seeing quantity rise here. So maybe we need to like back up the supply curve here. And so we actually end up here. And that's not quite the way we want to go with this story. Instead, what you want to realize is that what you're confusing is two things. One, there is a curve shift. And that can be pretty much instantaneous in some ways, in that at one point in time, you are operating in a world with this supply curve and this demand curve. And then a factor changes, say like technology's improved, and you're able to produce more. And so now the reality is this supply curve. But just because the reality has changed, it can take a little while for the market to adjust. And so where you were getting lost in that previous analysis was confusing the impact of a curve shift with market adjustment. So what we have then is we were at this price and this quantity where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. But all of a sudden, even though this is the market price, this is no longer, and it is the quantity demanded, it is no longer the quantity supplied, okay? At this price, the quantity supplied would be way out here. And so now we're back into that world we've talked about when we did shortages and surpluses of needing to adjust to the market price. So what has happened is because this factor has changed, because the supply has increased, we are now in a situation where we're no longer at market equilibrium. And so at the old market price, there is a higher quantity being supplied than demanded. There is a surplus. The way to clear the surplus is they will start to cut the price of the product, which will signal to producers to cut back their supply, and we move down along the new supply curve. And then the cut in price is also a signal to the consumers to buy more. The quantity demanded will rise, and that will continue up until the point we reach our new equilibrium. And so there is something to that mistaken analysis that we do see that the lower price, this was the original market equilibrium price, and this will be the new. So there is this decrease in price is causing, look at this movement right here, it is causing movement along the new supply curve. So the law of supply does hold, in fact. And so that's where they were getting lost. But see, that's the key thing, because if we look back at that other graph where they started moving the supply curve to capture this relationship, that's why it's so important to understand that price cannot shift a supply curve. This change in price that's caused by a supply curve will cause movement along the curve. So we have this initial factor that changes. Technology has improved, supply curve has shifted, and that's what we've got here, S to S prime. And the adjustment to the new market equilibrium will cause this movement along the curves, the new supply curve and the demand curve, to get to the equilibrium. So that's just something to watch out for when you start playing around with some of this stuff.